The man's chest is adorned with a book that shadows him to become stronger. Now he needs to participate in the martial arts examination. In such disastrous years, most industries no longer have advantages, especially the cultural, entertainment, and art industries. Those top-tier art professionals have directly become the bottom of society. People no longer care about traffic and celebrities. Instead, they are more concerned about national affairs. Just like the Night Guard Bureau, those who fight on the front lines have become the focus of people's attention. Wanting to join the Night Guard Bureau is no simple matter. You must pass the National Martial Arts Examination. Once you pass the martial arts examination, it means your life will no longer be ordinary. At this moment, Lucia is still administering medicine to Aries. Lucia, with her head down, somewhat disheartenedly said, "Actually, I don't want to participate in the martial arts examination." Aries was taken aback upon hearing this. Lucia lightly bit her lip, as if making a determined decision. She said to Aries, "Actually, I want to learn music." Aries was a bit puzzled and said, "If you want to learn, just go ahead and learn. Does Uncle Lou disagree with it?" Actually, Aries understands it in his heart. It's understandable if Uncle Lou disagrees. After all, he is a senior official of the Night Guard Bureau. It's like letting an official's child become a freelancer. Lucia whispered, "It's not that he disagrees. I tell you not to talk to others about this. The policy has changed from this term. This year, as long as the aptitude is up to standard, everyone must participate in the martial arts examination to apply for the professional extraordinary type." Aries is a bit puzzled. Wasn't individual preference respected before? Those with average aptitude were allowed to apply for the general examination. Lucia is feeling a bit helpless. The pressure at the Night Guard Bureau is increasing. It's highly likely that I will have to apply for the martial arts examination. Aries nodded. Lucia's grades in the extraordinary type courses are all good, even outstanding. If it comes to it, she will definitely have to take the martial arts examination. Aries suddenly remembered the bracelet-like thing Lucia showed him that day. The inspection for the martial arts examination is very strict. In his current state, if he were to pass that test, he would likely be treated as an exotic species and be killed on the spot without even needing interrogation. His unreliable little handbook. Could it be that he wants to align himself with the exotic species camp? Suddenly, Aries came up with an idea. So he asked Lucia, "By the way, the thing you tested on me last time, can it be used to defend against exotic species?" Lucia laughed and said, "What are you thinking? How is that possible? That device can only be used to detect when exotic species and extraordinary beings encounter each other. You better run when you come across exotic species." Aries was stunned. Could it be that he himself is an extraordinary being? Lucia saw that there was nothing urgent and stood up, saying, "Your injuries have all been taken care of. I will head back first." Aries finally had some clues. He had to ask Lucia something. So he said, "Do you have basic knowledge about extraordinary beings and exotic species at your home? Can you show me?" Lucia tilted her head and said, "Aren't you planning to take the general examination? Why are you interested in extraordinary beings now?" Aries could only smile bitterly and said, "You said it yourself that it's mandatory. What if I have a talent? I just want to get an early understanding." Lucia suddenly leaned in and asked, "Is that so? Why do I feel like you're keeping something from me?" This caught Aries off guard, and he blushed rare. He explained, "Of course. And I plan to create a shonen manga about extraordinary beings and exotic species." It was better when he didn't say that. As soon as he mentioned it, Lucia became interested. She pestered Aries to tell her more. Aries suddenly didn't know what to do. He just said it casually. So he could only start improvising. He used the settings from his manga before the transmigration and roughly explained it to Lucia. This moment would be a rare moment of warmth. Pay attention to this man. he a shadow exercise for him. He goes to the girl's house to play VR. Aries followed Lucia to her home. Lucia said, "Just stay here. I'll go to my dad's room to get some documents for you." He looked around the room. It was a typical girl's room. At this moment, Aries noticed a manga titled, "The Void of Fate," and picked it up, exclaiming, "The Void of Fate! This is a manga about sibling romance, right? You actually read that type of genre." Lucia immediately snatched the manga and said with a blush, "This belongs to my friend and was left with me. I'm not actually reading it." "Put the manga back," she said. "Just sit still and don't touch my things." Aries waved his hand. "I won't move, I promise." Aries found it somewhat amusing deep down. Lucia was still the same, without any defenses against others. He turned his head and saw an old guitar placed to the side. He thought to himself, "This girl has been fond of music since she was young. She hasn't thrown away old items from before. At that time, she used to pester me to listen with her. Unfortunately, I don't have much musical talent. I can't appreciate it at all." He then pressed the play button on the desktop recorder, lost in his thoughts. Suddenly, a melodious tune started playing, accompanied by the soothing music. Aries remembered his past with Lucia from childhood to present. They went from acquaintances to close companions. He fell asleep without realizing it. Lucia's voice came at this moment, waking up Aries. "When did you start liking music? You didn't even recognize all the musical instruments before." However, Lucia did not delve into this matter. She tossed a VR player to Aries and said, "Everything you want to know is here. See for yourself." Aries put on the VR device and then pressed the start button. Immediately, Aries felt as if he had been sucked into a universe. He could even feel a sense of weightlessness. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself under a starry sky. Countless eyes made up of light stared at him. Is this abyss? This VR is too realistic. It feels like he is really there. At this moment, a voice sounded in his ear. "Abyss is an unknown realm filled with taboos and dangers. It is the source of the entire cataclysm. Exotic species are born here. They are cruel and murderous. They launch repeated invasions into our world, attempting to destroy it." Aries looked at those wriggling bizarre figures. Are these the exotic species? Then what he saw at the hospital, could it be? The voice continued saying, "There is an interlayer between our world and the abyss. It is called the shadow layer, also known as the hidden side of the world because it projects the real world. When the abyss cracks open, exotic species will infiltrate the real world through the shadow layer. Despite the night guard bureau guarding almost all entrances and exits, there are still fish that slip through the net." Aries listened to the voice. His figure continued to fly forward in this world. Before long, he arrived in a city. The voice continued, "The shadow layer resets itself every month to recreate our world scenes. At this time, the number of exotic species will also increase significantly. They need to be cleared in a timely manner. However, the shadow layer will greatly weaken human combat power. Therefore, it is not recommended for Stage 4 or higher level experts to come here. The visual range of the shadow layer is 3 to 5 meters, expanding with strength. There is a large amount of pollution in the shadow layer. Humans staying here for a long time may be infected and turn into exotic species." Upon hearing this, Aries was stunned, finding it quite comfortable to stay in the pollution without feeling any discomfort. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind Aries. That is a powerful single-eyed exotic species. Aries' heart was not in good condition, but Aries didn't have time to react yet. A blazing beam of light struck, instantly, leaving nothing of that single-eyed exotic species. And not far away, a fierce ball of light rises, causing those exotic species to avoid looking directly at it. The voice speaks again, intending to deal with the exotic species. "You are about to grasp the power to rival the exotic species. become an extraordinary being. Finally, the light ball disperses. It leaves behind a figure shining with golden light all over the body. He is playing around with childhood sweethearts. He was caught by her father. He made Uncle Lou so angry that he was about to look for a knife. Aries flirted with her, and then turned around and ran away. He looked at the extraordinary being standing in front of him, exuding a sense of majesty. Aries did not feel excitement. He walked up and poked extraordinary being, thinking that if he could become so handsome by passing the martial arts examination. The voiceover continued, however. Extraordinary being was no longer human in essence, but an exotic species with a human body, controlling power while being corrupted by it. As soon as the voiceover fell silent, the golden figure in front of him was suddenly engulfed by darkness, just like degradation. He even emitted strands of black aura. In the end, he completely transformed into a creature with a completely black body, resembling an exotic species. The narrator's voice sounded again. Extraordinary being is constantly battling against pollution and alienation. After they die, there is a high probability that they will transform into exotic species. At this moment, the extraordinary being that had already been engulfed in darkness began to transform once again in appearance. Countless tentacles extended from his body. His original arms transformed into massive claws. His body also began to swell. The narrator spoke again. As an extraordinary being, if you are already aware that you cannot survive, then death is inevitable. Please, before you die, exhaust all your strength. In the end, that extraordinary being of degradation was met with a shocked gaze from Aries. He completely transformed into a huge exotic species several stories high. The exotic species looked down at Aries. Just as it slowly approached, a flash of light passed before Aries' eyes. He then detached himself from the holographic image. This sudden movement actually startled Lucia. She quickly asked, "What's wrong?" Aries shook his head and replied, "It's nothing. There's just too much information. I may not be able to digest it all at once." With a tilt of his head, he said to Lucia, "Come on, give me a back massage." Lucia was about to explode when Aries extended 3 fingers, showing 3 original drawings. Ultra clear. You decide the content, Aries thought. Can I still beat you with this? As expected, Lucia teleported behind Aries in an instant and started giving him a massage. After a few taps, Lucia felt something was off. "Why is your back so hard?" Aries, unblushing, replied, "That's because I've been working out so hard. Naturally, my muscle mass has increased." Rolling her eyes, Lucia asked, "So have you developed abs then?" Aries responded, "Definitely. Why? Do you want to touch them?" Lucia wasn't polite at all. She just lifted Aries' shirt and touched him without any hesitation. Just then, Lucia's door was opened. Lucia's father stood at the doorway, his veins bulging on his forehead. Aries was startled and greeted him awkwardly. "Uncle Lou." It was getting late, so Lucia insisted that Aries stay for dinner at home, even though Uncle Lou was 100% unwilling. During the meal, Aries secretly glanced at Uncle Lou. Uncle Lou's mouth made a crackling sound as he gnawed on the bone, as if the bone in his mouth were Aries' thigh bone. Aries clearly felt that without Lucia there, Uncle Lou could pounce on him and tear him apart. At this moment, Lucia gave Uncle Lou a squeeze and said, "Dad, you've got it all wrong." Uncle Lou snorted, "I misunderstood? What could I have misunderstood? I saw you two together with my own eyes, barely dressed. How could I have misunderstood that?" Lucia was choked and didn't know how to respond. She could only turn to Aries for help. "Aries, can you explain a few words?" Aries suddenly came up with a bad idea. So he picked up the water cup, with a serious look on his face, and said, "Dad." "Oh no, Uncle Lou, everything is understood without being said. I'll punish myself with 3 cups. Then he drank all the juice in the cup. The two people across from him were completely stunned. Lucia thought, "Is that your explanation?" Uncle Lou thought, "What are you explaining?" Uncle Lou could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. The daughter he had raised so painstakingly was about to fall into the hands of this scoundrel. He directly shouted, "You bold little brat, you've got guts. Today I won't kill you. Consider yourself lucky for having thick skin." He flipped the table with one hand, threatening to beat Aries. Aries didn't dare to stay any longer, and ran away immediately. Extraordinary world. He is really taking it one step at a time. Aries and Lucia have known each other since they were young. They are true childhood sweethearts, but their personalities are completely different. Aries is the typical negative example, often referred to as a bad boy, whereas Lucia is the typical well-educated and rational young lady. But for some reason, Lucia has always liked playing with Aries since she was young. She has even done absurd things like competing with Aries to see who can pee the farthest. Maybe it's because of Lucia, a little girl. She is often bullied by other naughty kids. But every time, it's Aries who stands in front of her to protect her. She always involuntarily puts on a halo when she looks at Aries. She is even willing to accompany him to do silly things like pretending to be a homeless child and playing pranks. Although he was later disabled by Uncle Lou. The scene returns to this moment. Uncle Lou looks at the two people standing in front of him. His face looks really bad. This smelly kid has been cautious since he was a child. How come he can never seem to be cautious enough? With that said, he reached out and tried to fish into his pocket. This look and this action. Aries even suspected that he might pull out a pistol in the next second and shoot himself. But fortunately, in the end, he only pulled out a lighter. He was about to light the cigarette in his mouth. Lucia's eyes narrowed when she saw the scene. She walked up and snatched the cigarette away. How come her dad can't remember to quit smoking? Uncle Lou, seeing the failed attempt at lighting a cigarette, could only ask, "What were you doing when I came back?" Aries, filled with an intense desire to survive, shouted out, "Report! We were looking at information on extraordinary and exotic species." Uncle Lou turned around and looked at Lucia, his own daughter, always favoring this boy. He just showed him the confidential information like that. Lucia knew she was in the wrong. She could only stick out her tongue and try to play dumb to get through it. However, Uncle Lou also breathed a sigh of relief. Checking the information was better than losing his daughter. Looking at the information, he asked sternly, "Aries, do you know why the government doesn't want students to have access to these in advance?" Aries shook his head in confusion. He truly didn't know about this. Uncle Lou said, "When the heart deviates, the self turns evil. Despair can drag people into the abyss, so some things are not suitable for disclosure to everyone." He put the cigarette back in his mouth without lighting it. He continued, "Not everyone's willpower is strong enough. Even the slightest crack in the heart can provide an opportunity for exotic species to take advantage. So there must be an aptitude test before the martial arts examination. Only those whose physique and willpower meet the standards can qualify to get in touch with the extraordinary world. The path to the extraordinary can be described as one step at a time, extremely dangerous. Even with the aid of instruments and treatment, people still fall into loss of control every year. It's regrettable. I don't recommend you learn about these. Can you understand?" Aries smiled at this point and said, "I understand. Thank you, Uncle Lou." He immediately changed the subject and said, "But this year is the Unified Martial Arts Examination. There's no escaping it, right? Besides, it's better to rely on yourself than on others. Even if the sky falls, there will be tall ones to hold it up. I just try to keep a calm mindset." Uncle Lou shook his head somewhat helplessly, about to speak when the phone suddenly rang. When he answered the phone, it turned out to be a call from the bureau. An urgent mission from the shadow layer. Upon hearing this, Uncle Lou immediately got up and prepared to set off. Before leaving, he didn't forget to turn around and warn Aries. I'm going on a mission. Aries, you better behave yourself. If I catch you again, I'll bring you back to the Night Guard Bureau. Aries solemnly patted his chest and said, Don't worry, Uncle Lou, Lucia and I will never do anything inappropriate again. Upon hearing this, Lucia spurted out a mouthful of water. She went up and grabbed Aries' face, gritting her teeth as she said, What do you mean again? We didn't do anything before either. You did it on purpose, didn't you? In the future, he really needs to check his fortune before going out. The new year is approaching. The streets and alleys are gradually becoming lively. While Aries is shopping at the supermarket, he watches the scrolling recruitment advertisement for the Night Guard Bureau on the big screen. He still feels a little regretful in his heart. He originally intended to look at more materials. Uncle Luke came back too quickly, so he only looked at some basic information. Uncle Lou's temper definitely means that the materials were hidden away. He's afraid there's not even a door to look at. Just thinking about it made heave a sigh. He threw a bottle of soy sauce into the shopping basket. Just at that moment, the phone rang. Aries took it out and found that it was Lucia calling. Lucia wants Aries to bring some things. Milk, eggs, and so on. Finally, she hesitated and said, Just these. Aries is not meeting Lucia for the first time, so he knows from Lucia's tone. She wants him to bring her sanitary napkins, but she is too embarrassed to say it directly. He thought about it and picked up 2 packs of overnight sanitary pads and threw them into the shopping basket. When he had bought enough, Aries began to walk back. School starts in a month. The effectiveness of Shadow's training seems to be weakening. It seems that simply training with Shadow may not be enough. He must increase some real combat training. Suddenly, Aries found himself on this road. He saw more and more propaganda about combating exotic species. This year, the martial arts examination is still expanding enrollment forcibly. It seems that the situation of combating exotic species is not optimistic. Thinking about it, he looked up at the sky. I don't know if anything bad will happen in the future. But for now, I won't think too much about it. Thinking too much made him feel annoyed. He decided to fight the exotic species he met before to vent his frustrations. Thinking about it, he walked into an empty alley. He looked around and found no one else there. He then activated Shadow Eyes. He submerged his whole self into the world of the hidden side, and just as he arrived at the world of hidden side, Aries realized that something was wrong. He saw in the indistinct shadow, not far away, the emergence of an HP bar, with only 14 points left. He quickly became vigilant and shouted, Who's there? And at that moment, from that corner came the clattering sound of footsteps. The person seemed to have difficulty with their legs and feet. Aries walked towards the corner and found a young man beneath the HP bar at this point, covered in blood with several large bloody holes. One of his legs strangely deformed and dragged behind him. As the young man approached, Aries began to feel that something was amiss. The man's face looked somewhat familiar. At this moment, Aries suddenly remembered something and took 2 steps back. He exclaimed, You seem to be from the same building as me. How come you're here? The young man did not reply. Or perhaps he was in no condition to respond. He seemed to have lost strength and fell to the ground. Aries watched this scene, unsure of what to do for a moment. The young man in front of him only had 14 health points left, almost in a dying state. Should he save him or not? Suddenly, Aries noticed something was wrong. Not far behind the young man, there were actually 2 kids. How could such young children enter the hidden side? Upon closer inspection, the exotic species hovering near the kids, ready to attack, looked more and more familiar to Aries. Suddenly, Aries quickly assumed a ready battle stance. He growled lowly, What are you doing here? So it turns out it's Ghost with only 24 health points left. It turns out it's the one that fought Aries for quite a while. Aries activates combat mode. Today you will be killed by me as you watch the scene unfold. Aries took a quick glance and made a rough guess. This young man should be from the Night Guard Bureau, but he is probably in a clerical position. The two kids were dragged in by exotic species from the hidden side. This young man may have just happened to stumble into the hidden side trying to save them. As a clerical position, he doesn't have strong combat abilities. And now, this young man is covered in pollution. He should have taken the pills distributed by the Night Guard Bureau that trigger a last-minute burst of energy. Don't say that Aries really made an educated guess. That's pretty close. So Aries helped the young man up and let him lean against the wall to rest for a while. He then stood up. He rubbed his hands together in preparation to deal with that ghost. Just as the young man was looking at the confident Aries in front of him, thinking he was some mysterious powerful figure, the ghost had already rushed over and punched him. It directly knocked Aries away. The young man couldn't help but complain in his heart. "This is too weak. Hurry up and destroy it." Then the ghost, an exotic species, swiftly twirled the bone knife in his hand. Radiating a red light, he slashed towards the young man. But just at that moment, a hand accompanied by a strong gust of wind reached out. He smacked the ghost exotic species right in the face, distorting its features. This slap actually took away 1% of its health points. This can be described as not very damaging but highly insulting. Aries has actually run back. He waved the soy sauce bottle at that ghost. The useless brat stared straight at me. "You come and spar with me for a few moves." Ghost quickly rotates and swings towards Aries. Aries moves his feet, deftly avoiding the attack. He gives a slight tilt to the soy sauce bottle in his hand. Then he swings fiercely and smashes it on the exotic species. The exotic species feels a sharp pain, and the sickle chops down in one fell swoop. It never occurred to it that Aries, who was as slippery as an eel, suddenly appeared behind the exotic species. He thrust the broken bottle in his hand directly into the body of the exotic species. The exotic species became very angry, and the sickle danced up into the air. But Aries had already figured out its tricks. It couldn't slash Aries at all. This actually made the exotic species very angry. And Aries was dodging while poking the exotic species with a wine bottle. In just a moment, he poked at least a dozen times. Its HP didn't drop much, but its blood pressure rose quite high. In the end, it even took the initiative to step back. Now it's looking at the half bottle in Aries' hand. Its body started to ache. The young man sitting on the side for a moment didn't know whether to say Aries is awesome or weak. Clearly, there is no technique, and every move is aimed at the body. But inexplicably, he actually suppressed the exotic species. At this moment, Aries reached out towards the ghost exotic species in midair. "You opened my eyes a few days ago. Today, I will poke your lower back." The ghost suddenly shrank back. Then, its lower body, resembling a long tail structure, whipped towards Aries. It directly flung the person far away. Aries struggled to get up, realizing his mistake. This made him more cautious. Ghost, with one look and one move, got the upper hand. He quickly rushed up. Aries is now in a dilemma. He can only withstand a few more hits to his health points. If he wants to survive, he should quit the hidden side now. He will come back in a few days to settle the score with it. It seems that saving his own life is not part of his character's setting. In the end, he gritted his teeth, and this exotic species only had 20 HP left. Today, he was determined to finish it off. At this moment, the young man leaning against the wall shouted, "Its right ribs are severely injured. Attack there!" Aries directly accelerated towards the exotic species' right side and pounced. Just watch. Ghost is critically injured on the right side by the exotic species. It instinctively covers the right side upon seeing this scene. Aries chuckles at the sight. His figure changed, and he appeared on the wide-open left side. With a bottle in hand, he stabbed it once again, causing it to lose 2% of its HP directly. It hurts. The exotic species suddenly turned around and ran, leaving Aries stunned. Why did it run away? The exotic species leaped over the young man against the wall. It pounced towards those two kids. The young man was suddenly shocked. Not good. It's not trying to run. It wants to use those two children for HP recovery. Is it allowed for exotic species to bite humans, but not allowed for me to bite exotic species? Where does this reasoning come from? Exotic species rushed towards the two kids at such a fast speed that it only took a few seconds to reach them. Exotic species directly opened its big mouth. It's about to bite towards the head of the kid. The kid was totally powerless to stop it. He could only watch helplessly as the huge mouthful of fangs came towards him. But just then, he heard a loud shout. Stop! The exotic species instinctively paused, only to see the veins bulging on Aries' arm. He reached out and pulled out the limited edition cola he had just bought at a high price. He threw with all his strength towards the exotic species' tilted head. The exotic species only felt a strong wind blowing from one side, not yet understanding what was happening. The can of cola has reached in front of it. Exotic species react very quickly. In just a moment, it raised its head and dodged this can of cola. But at this moment, the Night Guard Bureau young man, who was originally resting against the wall, he had already arrived at the other side of the exotic species. He pushed off with one leg and flew high into the air. He kicked towards that exotic species with his remaining good leg. He kicked directly on the wound that had been struck before. The exotic species immediately let out a piercing howl. It was in immense pain. This kick could be described as adding insult to injury. He directly kicked off 3% of the HP. While that young man also triggered the injuries within his body, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The exotic species harbored a grudge after being kicked by this blow. It turned around directly and bit towards the young man. Little did he expect that its mouth was already close to him. But it was directly caught by a pair of large hands. Aries grabbed the head of the exotic species from behind, with an evil smile saying, "You bite people. I'll bite you to death." After speaking, he opened his mouth and bit down on the neck of the exotic species. He bit the exotic species so hard that it screamed in pain. I have never seen anyone actually bite the exotic species. Today is truly an eye-opener. He bit off 1% of its HP with that bite. This is not over yet. Aries grabbed hold of the exotic species' flying hair. He put heavy pressure on the exotic species, pressing it to the ground. Then, as if in a street fight, he punched the exotic species relentlessly while yelling insults like, "Keep screaming, exotic species! Keep screaming! I'll skin you to make a toilet seat!" This continuous barrage of attacks left the exotic species with only 11% HP remaining. It's not over yet. Aries' sense of hitting is extremely good. His eloquent cursing flows like a spring. "You want to eat people, right? You are arrogant, right? I'll make you eat fists until you're full. Today, if I don't feed you enough, I won't be called Aries." At that moment, Aries suddenly noticed a red glowing ball flickering on the exotic species. He was also stunned. Then, he raised his hand. He instinctively swung towards the glowing ball. As his hand shattered the red light, Aries yelled out, "You go to hell!" Suddenly, a powerful aura bursts out from the exotic species. Then the exotic species completely exploded in this burst of energy, and even its head flew out. Aries gasped for breath as he fell to the ground. He was covered in blood, most of which was from the exotic species. And at this moment, the entire hidden side started to shake, because of the destroyed ground and other objects during the fight. Surprisingly, they started to rewind and gradually restored to their original state. Aries paused for a moment, then reached out to lift up his hair. He chuckled softly, finally getting revenge on my buttocks." Seeing the young man and 2 kids unharmed not far away, Ares felt relieved. He seemed to lose all support and collapsed to the ground when everything went dark before his eyes.